was gonna say, like Nettie Marshall would be kind of in
Oh, that's
between
a-
you two, but that wouldn't,
That's
that
a
wouldn't
ways
work.
off from
That-
a big,
that-
that's
that
way
wouldn't-
too far, yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't really split the difference.
No, that'd be a long
We
walk.
good? All right.
Alright.
All right, well, greetings. We'll call today's meeting of the Nacogdoches Historic Landmark Preservation Committee to order. The first item on the agenda is the approval of our minutes from the February 5th meeting. Any comments, issues, or motions?
I so move.
Yeah. Second?
I'll second.
Yes, sir.
All right. Any final discussion? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Okay, so we'll move on to our first item, HRG 2022-02. 002.
Hello, everyone. How are y'all today? Turn this on.
Uh-oh.
In theory, it's supposed to work.
It's like it got froze.
Yeah, that's weird.
And it's too hot to be frozen.
We're gonna do it this way for a second. See if I can get this to work now. There we go. Turn it off, turn it back on again. That's what our IT department tells me. So this item is a historic restoration grant extension for property 107, 111 North Pecan Street. Mr. Crisp is the applicant. He was originally awarded this grant application in the 2022 Historic Restoration Grant Cycle and has received 2 extensions to date. And so this most recent due date is March 5th. The applicant is requesting an additional 60 days to complete the work. They were actually pretty confident they were going to have it done on the 5th. They're here pretty soon, but did request that additional 60 days just to make sure they could complete the work and then get all the receipts to me so I can pull all that information together and then present back to this committee. Originally, the project was funded for 18% of the final cost, not to exceed $13,543. And if you can't remember back to 2022, which I cannot either, I had to look up this application. This is to rebuild the hand-drawn elevator and the roof of the building at 107, 111 North Pecan that did sustain damage during a fire. The contractors are actually on site today working. If you look at Mr. Crisp's Instagram story, which I'm sure Joan had something to do with it, there are pictures of the contractors out there working. A lot of the delays was trying to get contractors and roof contractors on site, and then some of their materials have been back ordered, but they are currently working on it. And as always, staff does not make recommendations on grant extension requests, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And also the applicant is here as well,
Okay.
after public comment, of course.
Yes. Yes. Does anybody have any questions of staff? All right, so at this point, I open it to public comment.
Yes.
Is there anybody who would like to make public comment? All right, okay, that's closed. So, discussion, do I hear any motions?
Well,
Make a motion to accept the extension of HRG 2022-002.
I second the motion.
Okay, any discussion?
Any discussion, just that I'm so grateful to Mr. Chris for the work he's done for our downtown. You can have any extensions you need. I trust him with appreciation,
Thank you
yes.
so much. He's working really hard to put a lot of time.
100%, yeah.
Well, this is a unique resource, and certainly downtown. Not many can claim to have this.
Thank y'all so much.
All right, so, hearing nothing else, all in favor of granting the extension for HRG 2022-002, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Wonderful. And the new grant deadline will be May 3rd of 2024. It's actually, I think, one day shy of 30 days, just so we get it on a weekday instead of a weekend. So we have that, and we'll pass that on to the applicant. Our next item is item 3B, Historic Restoration Grant Reimbursement. This is our first one of the 2024 grant cycle. If you'll remember, the projects were approved for the 2024 grant cycle back in November, and then the funding was finally approved after a few hiccups on the staff sides and a few delays, was approved by City Council in February. We had told the applicants since their projects were approved, they were welcome to start work, as long as they knew that the funding had not been approved yet, and then they could turn in their receipts once their project was completed. This applicant got everything done very quickly. This applicant was prepping and painting rotten wood on the trim of the house, replacing rotten wood where needed, and then replacing a deteriorated wrought iron fence that was in front of the building. The original estimate was for $52,205. And this applicant, like all of the rest for the 2024 grant cycle, was approved at 4.95%. And for this application was a not-to-exceed price of $2,586.22. Excuse me. The final cost of this project came in a little lower than the estimate, went with a separate contractor than was the original estimate. So the final project cost was $30,975. And so that 4.95% of that would be $1,533.26. The work has been complete. Photos have been turned back in, and staff recommends approval of releasing grant funds in that amount. And we also have the expense report here for you to review.
Does anybody have question of staff? All right, at this point, I will open it for public comment. Seeing none, we'll close that. All right, so do you all any motions?
I move that HRG 2024-001 be approved.
I second the motion.
All right. Any discussion? This is just nice to have it in. Yeah, and under budget, which is good for them too. All right, so in that case, all in favor of the motion as stated, state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next. We're gonna keep you hopping today, Jessica.
We are. I'm going to try to keep all these short and sweet and as efficient as possible. So our next item is item 3C. This is for 422 East Main Street. This application is for repainting a portion of the east wall on 422 East Main, which most of us know as the old Cowboy Jack's or the new Poppy's restaurant. The owner and applicant, which is part of the Brushing Up NAC organization that's putting several murals throughout the downtown area, is requesting to repaint a portion of the east facade of this building, approximately 20 feet tall by 10 feet wide, and then removing an unused marquee sign that was put up by a previous business that's no longer there. So the request is to repaint some brick, which is currently painted. It has kind of a tan color on it right now, a red color in some places, and staff went back, and our photos go back to 2012, and that brick facade has always been painted. So this is essentially repainting the brick just with a different series of colors. Instead of one solid color, it'd be multiple colors. The applicant is requesting to do a depiction of Domingo Ramon, who has quite a bit of history here in Nacogdoches. The applicant submitted several examples. Of course, this is not exactly to scale or the exact drawing, just kind of an example of what would be here. Here are a few pictures of that side of the building. You can see there is a kind of a tan color on the brick and then a reddish color, which looks like was there first. There was probably a bigger sign, the bigger sign taken off, so you could see the red under it, and then a smaller sign put up. And then this is an estimated size and placement of the proposed painting. And staff finds that criteria B, C, D, H, J, and K apply to this request. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
All right. Any questions of staff? All right, at this time, I'll open it for public comment, if there's any of that. Okay, we'll close that. All right. Actually, I have a question of staff. I have my note here and I forgot to ask. Is there any way, oh no, hold on, I'm on the wrong one. This one isn't for the plaque yet.
No, that's the next one. They're the next
Okay,
three,
never mind.
actually.
That's fine. Okay, so I have no questions.
Okay.
All right. So, a motion from anybody, one way or the other?
I make a motion that we accept COA 2024-004, because it meets the criteria for B, C, D, H, J, and K.
I'll second that. All right. Any discussion?
Just, I have a bit of discussion. Our city lawyer was here at our last meeting, and he said painting buildings, if you paint a building that significantly alters the appearance of the building, that does indeed fall under. And this painting, just bear with me here, will significantly alter the look of that building on that side. And so I think we ought to be careful about it. Now, specifically in this case, I'm a big fan of Ramon and the history that's connected with him. But I just think we really need to think about this, because this will really, it's not like Johnson's Furniture that's been painted for years, and you see a brick wall that's painted white, you clearly know it's painted. This has been relatively invisible on that wall.
It's still painted, so it's moot as far as the brick is concerned.
Well-
Because our reason for not painting the brick is because of the permeability of the brick.
If you painted the brick back brown, that would be maintenance. But now we're really changing the look. Now, I'm not necessarily gonna vote against this, but I think we as a committee, this is something that will truly alter a historic building downtown. So I'm not sure how I'm even gonna vote, but I just think it's important. We can't just wink at it.
And one note on the staff side, that is the reason this has come before HLPC today, before this ordinance change. Repainting painted brick would be considered ordinary maintenance, something administratively approved, but since this is not repainting tan for tan, it's repainting tan for multiple different colors in a mural depiction, that's why it's brought before HLPC for consideration.
There has not been a discussion amongst us about the whole public art project at all. This is the first time it's come before us.
Correct. And as far as the ordinance update goes, we still have our Secretary of Interior standards, which is what the decisions from HLPC based on city ordinances are supposed to be based on. So we don't have any separate policy about public art, types of acceptable murals, types of acceptable paintings. So it's still based on that Secretary of Interior standards. But no, this committee has not had a discussion separate from painting in the maintenance sense.
I would say I understand where you're coming from, Jeff, and I'm looking at these different criteria too, and there's K down here. This is preservation of historic features whenever possible. A new addition or alteration shall be done in such a manner that if it were to be removed in the future, the essential form and integrity of the building would be unimpaired. And so that fits in. I mean, if we put it up there and then everyone decides it's downtown for some reason, which I don't think they will. But, so it's a safe change,
It does
I
affect.
think. But I think you're right about keep an eye on it too.
Well, if it was maintenance, we would paint the whole wall. This isn't maintenance, this is a mural. Which,
Aesthetics.
by the way, again, I think we ought to celebrate Ramon and his, what he did in our history. So, this one's, I think, iffy. So, I'm not helping you, telling you what to, I think how you ought to
Right.
vote, because I'm not, I'm ambivalent.
I think it would look really cool. I can imagine come around the corner and
After
see.
the motion's made and it's seconded, then we discuss it.
Then we have to vote on the motion.
Okay, that's
Yes,
good.
that's
Oh,
the
Well,
procedure.
then here's another thing.
I'm only discussing it.
What
Right.
If you don't,
What if we hold until we have our design meeting and then we come to some agreement about what and we will do?
Design, sorry.
We're gonna bring up the design guidelines today, it's on the agenda.
Yes, we are gonna bring up the design guidelines. I don't know if that would direct a policy on public art necessarily. The design guidelines in the past, just how they stand, talk about historic preservation, styles, features, things like that of historic properties, and don't delve too much into paint colors specifically or what paint colors are appropriate or not. If that's something the committee wants to put in place in design guidelines, that would be something that we could look at in the future, but as of right now, we don't.
Where does that fall into? Who in the city does that, whose bailiwick is that? Whose ball care is that?
As far as paint colors
Yeah,
and,
as far as
far as
whole discussing
approval.
the whole public art thing on historic buildings. in
right now
particular.
it's us.
yeah, right now it's y'all. It's been a little bit of everywhere, because a lot of our mural projects started out with with Main Street, there's other cities that have like a public arts commission. They have their tourism bureau weigh in on it. As of right now, Nacogdoches doesn't have any specific board that oversees paint colors, mural topics, anything like that. If this was a mural being painted on Walmart, no one looks at it whatsoever because it's painting on a building that's not historic. So as of right now, any sort of painting in a historic district falls on Hlpc, but there is no guidance as far as colors, potential mural sizes, topics that are approved, anything like that. And for anything enforceable like that, I would think it would need to be written into ordinance, which would be something this board could recommend and then ultimately would go to city council. But as of right now, we don't have any guidance like that.
Jessica, there'll be a time when we'll have to deal with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure there are any guidelines that you could write in terms of appropriateness or not. I mean, it may be just if you can convince this board to vote for it, then you can get it, and if you can't, you can't. But the bottom line is, whether it be political questions or artistic questions or whatever, there's going to be a time when there are going to be people oppose someone as a request, and so I really think we need to think about it.
And I know that's something our city attorney is looking at because there's another city, I can't even tell you what city name it was right now, but they just put into ordinance some guidance and some rules and regulations on murals in their historic area. It's already being challenged in court because it's part of the public expression. And so I know there are some cities looking at that right now, and so I don't know what the process is going to be on their end. So I know our city attorney has been kind of watching that to see what other cities who have stepped out first and done something like that, kind of what they run into, so maybe that would help us in the future. I do think it's probably something that will come up. Just as of the time of this request, we don't have any additional guidance other than the preservation side of things.
I just think we are going to deal with it. We need to go ahead and do that at some point in time in the near future, or just decide that we're going to let ever how many people sitting on this board, it changes, so I
Well,
can't
you know,
remember how many it is.
I, just for number one, I'd like, almost on the verge, would say, let's approve this so we can take down that ratty sign that's there. But number two, if we approve this, we need to be very careful that we do it on the basis of, we're not approving just every color change on every painted wall willy-nilly. Just, we're gonna be relatively arbitrary here.
Yeah.
Because of our taste, whether we like it or not. And so, this is, because if we were painting it beige again, that would be awful,
Yeah.
there wouldn't be any question. But we're gonna really change the look of that wall.
But two things that I see that clearly say it's okay. The wall is painted and we do not have a approved paint palette. So to me, and it's appropriate, it's historic, it's Nacogdoches history. So I'm just saying, we've already made a motion. I feel like it's a fait accompli, and the building would only look better.
Well, can I just object?
Sure,
It's
you
not a
can
fait accompli, we're gonna have to vote on it,
I know.
so.
But
there-
those two things that we already have, the painted, pre-painted, it's already painted, and we don't have a paint palette.
Well, we were told last week, if you change the significant look of the building, it is important. Can I tell you this right now? I'm gonna vote for it, but we need to be careful what we do on this committee.
I agree.
And just because we vote for this one, someone may come down, well, so you voted for that one, why don't you vote for this one?
Well, this,
You see what I mean?
this
And
is
So
where
Judy-
it's a question. There you
and
go. That's
Judy,
all.
what was your,
this is where it comes into play.
what was your suggestion earlier about
We-
just to look at the guidelines and design?
Well, we are going to discuss our design guidelines
Correct.
today.
Right.
And I think within that, we need to start thinking about this. I mean, Lynn and I've talked about this before. This has to happen. We need to have a discussion. And,
Right.
and a city council person asked me, had it come in front of us before? And I said, no, it has not been in front of us before. And so, again, I'm gonna go back to what we have on the books already about painting brick. If it's been painted, you can paint it, okay? And we do not have an approved historic paint palette, we don't. So, look at Reese Jewelry, I mean, give me a break here, you can pretty much do anything within with those two things. So, I do think historically it's an appropriate, image. So I'm just saying, I don't see how we can fight it at this point until we discuss that and it's on the books.
The way we fight is we vote against it or for it. If we vote against it, it doesn't come forward.
Well, that's true too, but I'm just.
Bottom line
I'm
is-
just making the case of why we should.
That's good, that's a good.
So I'll point out, your concern about art also includes statues and any other
Yes, it
type of
does.
artwork.
That's true.
Yes.
It's all inclusive.
And I also
Yes.
think there's a distinction, and correct me if I'm wrong, between design and art. Like design guidelines and paint palettes and things are different, I think, than art.
Well, yeah,
And also,
maybe.
just
Paint's
a note
hard.
for our design guidelines that we already gonna discuss, those are suggestions to property owners.
Okay.
If they are looking for guidance on, if they bought this mid-century modern house in our historic district and they have no idea how to restore it, what type of windows are appropriate, we kind of give them those things. Those design guidelines, are not in our code of ordinances. So I can't say you did not follow chapter 10 or chapter 12 to the letter, you did the wrong, partitions on your windows, things like that. So they are suggestions that were put together by a lot of very smart historic preservationists, but they're not written into code. So we can have a discussion on, and we'll get to this a little bit later, but on suggested color palettes, things like that, if they're written in design guidelines, it's easier for us to get to people, but it's still not something necessarily enforceable. That would be more of an approved color palette in the code of ordinances.
Lively discussion. Other points? I don't want to look that way
All
and
right.
miss anybody over here.
I think they covered everything.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. Well, in that case, we have a motion before us. So all in favor of the motion, which was to approve per B, C, D, H, J, and K, state aye.
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 Any opposed, state aye or nay. Always, you hear half say.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Next.
And I should have apologized early on. If I cough and take drinks through this, it's because last week I did not have a voice at all, so I'm really trying to keep it right now. These allergies are slowly killing me. Our next agenda item is agenda item 3D. This is a request for 216 East Pillar Street. I do apologize, at one point in your packet, I transposed the letters. It says 261. It is 216 East Pillar Street. This applicant is another part of the Brushing Up NAC initiative. This request is for a 12 by 18 inch aluminum sign affixed to the east wall of 216 East Pillar Street. This plaque is going to have information about the recently repainted Coca-Cola mural that came before this board probably 4 or 5 months ago, as well as information about the project partners and sponsors with a QR code directing whoever's going to scan it to more information about some of these murals here in town. The applicant is requesting to screw the plaques to the bricks because they are pretty heavy plaques. We've seen some people do signs downtown with some of that temporary adhesive glue. The fear is if we put it on with that glue and that plaque starts to fall, it's going to rip off the front of the bricks as well because these are older bricks. So the request is to screw the plaque into the brick as well as seal around the plaque with some silicone to make sure that water doesn't leak in between. And then the items that apply to this request are B, C, D, and J. We do have some pictures. The black square that I've outlined in bright yellow is the proposed location. Again, it's a 12 by 18 inch sign. You can see here, this is the proposed rendering of it. The wording may change a little bit here and there, but essentially it's a title, recognition of artists, recognition of donors, and then partners with that raised QR code. The applicants are going to do a raised QR codes because we've seen places that when they just print them, people tape QR codes over it that may take you to a different website that you don't want people to peruse. That happens. People do wild things in this day and age. So the idea is a raised QR code, which will hopefully keep people from altering it or covering it up. A similar look and feel to some of the other plaques we have downtown. And again, some other examples of some of those raised aluminum with kind of the speckled backing. So this is an example. Of course, the exact plaques have not been made yet because we want to make sure had approval first. And I believe the applicants are here if you have any questions of them, and I'm happy to answer any questions as well.
So, any questions of staff?
And I will note that this item and the next two items are very similar, so
Yes.
we'll probably not go into as much detail on the other two, but all of the plaques are same size, material, just different placements, in case there was any confusion in the packet.
Any questions of staff? All right, So, open for public comment. Okay, we'll close that. So, Jessica, and you can direct me on which way, so, as usual. So I have a question about the sealant.
Okay.
When I read the sealant, I feel that that's a recipe for disaster because it's going to break down and then we have water actually pooling behind. So I did a walking tour of our metal plaques on our historic buildings around here, and you can see right behind them all. There is no sealant on ours. And so I'm concerned about making a micro hot boiling convection oven behind the metal between that and the historic brick.
And that,
Are they?
that may have been a miscommunication between me and the applicant, because I know we had talked about doing sealant in the screw holes, which HLPC has requested in the past, where
Right.
when everything's bored into the brick to then, once the screw is in there, or the anchor, to then do silicone around it to make sure you don't have exposed brick. But I know, Brandon, you want to say?
Because the way this reads is it's a full envelope around. And that's, I was concerned about.
Hello, I'm Brandon Rao. I'm with Brushing Up Knack, and that is correct. It's actually going to be inside of these screw holes in order
Okay.
to prevent water from seeping in there, also to weather it for any
Okay.
particular type of event. So, do you have any other questions?
No,
regarding-
I just, the way it read, it was
On the
full
outside?
outside frame.
And that
That's
was
what
For the
I was-
plaque.
Okay,
I initially thought that's what had to be done, but
Okay.
no, the inside would be way better.
okay,
I
And so
think
the
the
plaque has a,
manufacturer's recommendation
right.
on all those are that it not be done.
right. And that's why I kind of was a little panicked about that.
so they all have a spacer that keeps them away from the brick, is that correct?
Yes, sir. It's
Correct.
gonna be, maybe a few centimeters.
Right,
It's gonna
yeah,
be off.
yeah.
And
That makes sense.
it is gonna be sealed, and that is also for the other plaques that we're requesting.
Okay.
It's the same thing. They're all aluminum, and that's what we're aiming for, and just for longevity, because the idea is to have these murals up for decades, if possible, at least. So that's why we want some signs to match that, ideally.
All right, I appreciate that
Yes, of course.
clarification.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, before I said thank you, anybody else have a question?
Well, thank you for your work too, Perky, on that.
Yes.
All right, any of, did I close? No, that was a question, so, okay. This whole new order is, I'm keeping track of it. Okay, so any other questions of staff?
And I do apologize for the confusion.
No,
I
no.
did not mean to write it that way.
No, that's okay. That's our job. Well, in that case, I'd like to make a proposal that we approve COA 2024-005, that it meets criteria B, C, D, and J of the design, of the guidelines ordinance.
I'll second that motion.
All right. Discussion? Any? All right, well, hearing none. All those in favor of the motion as stated, please state aye. Aye. Any opposed? State aye. Okay, next.
Our next item is very similar. It is a 12 by 18-inch aluminum plaque on the west side of the building at 111 East Main Street. This would be for the recently completed Garden Capitol mural. Again, aluminum sign screwed into the building with silicone around the anchor only, not around the entire plaque, just for clarification's sake. Same ordinance criteria apply, B, C, D, and J. You can see here in your packet, there's a picture of the Garden Capitol mural, as well as the proposed placement of the sign on the brick. This is the proposed area. This brick is relatively new. The Johnsons have owned this building for a very long time, so have done a lot of maintenance on it over the years, so this is probably not the original brick. So this is the proposed placement. Again, very similar to the other one as far as title of the mural, artist, recognition of donors, and also that QR code as well. And it would be the same material, style, look and feel, just different placement on this item. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, questions of staff? All right, we'll open it for public comment.
You don't have to do it again.
All right, we'll close. Okay. Any last questions of staff before? All right, I'll ask for a motion.
I move that we approve, COA 2024-007. Is that the one? Oh, that's the
We're on
wrong one. I'm
six.
sorry, had already turned the page. I move that we approve the plaque we've been discussing.
2024-006.
006.
006. I'll second that.
Any discussion? All right, in that case, all in favor of the motion as stated, state aye. Any opposed, state aye. Okay.
Very similar song and dance on this next item, 3F. The difference in this one is the applicant is requesting to install two 12 by 18 signs. These are actually two different COAs that we combined into one case because it is the same building. One of the plaques would go on the east side of the building, and then one would go on the south side. These are for murals that have not yet been painted, but were administratively approved before the ordinance change. And the applicant has supplied some examples of the mural, and I think most of y'all have probably seen it by this point. But the west side would be a welcome to Nacogdoches with our 9 flags, and then the south side of the building will be a Father Marhill that is still under design, hasn't been started yet, other than to paint the former many-colored mural into one solid color as a good backing on it. But the applicant is requesting to do the two 12 by 18 aluminum plaques with attached to the brick with screws with silicone around the anchors. You can see the proposed locations here. This is for the west side of the building at 100 East Main Street. This is probably the only place you could actually stand and look at a plaque on this building safely since it faces South Street. And this is kind of another angle from the side. This is the Welcome to Nacogdoches mural that will be describing that mural plus any potential donors, in-kind donors, and recognizing the artist. This is the placement for the plaque on the south side of the building. Excuse me, again, this is a solid color right now. Used to be several advertisements for Johnson Furniture and some of the products they sell. It's been painted over for a solid background, and then we'll have a Father Marhill mural on it in the future. These plaques would be installed once the murals are completed, and they are not up to date. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you have after public comment.
All right, so state, any questions for staff? All right, I'll open it for public comment. All right, we're closed. Any other final questions of staff?
I should mention that city criteria ordinance, or B, C, D, and J apply to this request. Again.
In that case, do I hear a motion about this request?
I'll make a motion to approve COA 2024007, meeting criteria B, C, D, and J.
I'll second it.
All right, any discussion? All right, so all in favor of the motion as stated, please state aye.
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 Any opposed? State aye. Oh,
I'll make a brief comment.
sure, we're done.
I just voted yes,
Okay.
but the date is 17/16.
Oh, well, yeah, definitely. Oh,
17/16. Just a little note.
cheaper to fix it now than in the future.
If not, Morris Jackson will get all of us for that one.
Thank gosh it's paved. All right.
All right, so our next
Our next item is item 3G. This is not a plaque, thank goodness, something new to talk about. This application is for 222 North Mound Street. The applicant is requesting to install 9 mini-split HVAC units and 2 tankless water heaters. My autocorrect was killing me, and I don't know if y'all noticed in the packet, one of them is a thankless water heater. That I did. It autocorrected every time, and I caught all of them in edits except for that one. So these are for 9 mini-split HVAC units and 2 tankless water heaters on the exterior of the home. This building was built as a single-family home and then was split into multiple apartments years ago. And so right now, the bottom floor relies on gas fireplaces and wall-mounted heaters, as well as window units. So the new owners are requesting to install these mini splits and tankless water heaters, so that way they can have more central heat and air and hot water in the bottom floor of the building. So all of these units would be mounted to the outside of the building. The proposed HVAC units are roughly 2 feet tall by 3 feet long, and then the water heaters are about 17 inches wide by 26 inches tall. They're all mounted to the outside of the building and then have accompanying hoses and wiring that goes with it. We see them pretty commonly in older houses because usually it's a little bit easier to do that rather than running ductwork if the building wasn't designed for ductwork. So we have seen that in the past. The applicant also indicated they were hoping to put as much landscaping as feasible to cover up some of these from the outside, but you will be able to see them a bit. And also any place where they are putting in a mini split unit, the accompanying window unit would come out. On the drawings that I'll mention before I go. Criteria B, C, J, and K relate to this request. The applicant supplied some drawings, which are a little bit easier to see in your packet than on our PowerPoint. So essentially on the north side, there would be 2 HVAC units. On the north side back, because of how this house runs, there's kind of 2 sides to the north almost. It's divided in the middle. But the north side back, there would be 2 HVACs and 2 water heaters. The south side would have 3 HVAC units. One is on the porch. It's a little bit harder to see in this picture. And then on the east side would have 2 HVAC units as well. And then you can see where they've kind of scratched out any of the window units because those would come out. So those are here. So anything in red is an HVAC unit. Anything in blue is the tankless water heaters. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and the applicant is here as well. Yes. I knew I saw her sneak in.
Okay, so questions of staff? All right, so at this time, I'll open it up to public comment. All right, we close. Final chance to ask questions of staff. Oh, yeah.
Oh, and I should mention,
pictures.
these are examples. These are not the actual units because they've not been purchased yet since they were not approved by Hlpc at this point. So it'll be something similar to this. Most of the sizes, unless you are getting a very large commercial mini split, are very comparable. So you're not gonna see a huge fluctuation in size. So these are examples of what the applicant is looking at, but have not purchased them to install yet.
So I guess let me ask this, so should they come, so in the packet, it said, like 17 by 27 or something like that, and this one's 17 by 26 for the, I'm assuming that's the tankless hot water heater.
It's not
Yes.
tankless. Yes, on the, right, correct.
So if they come with one that's 2 feet by 3 feet wide, then what would be the, we're approving something close to this, not something 2 to 3 feet.
Correct. This was an example provided by the applicant, so Hlpc has the option to require exactly this model and exactly this size. That's typically not what has been done.
Right.
It's typically been, we are, approving or denying but in this example, approving a tankless water heater to be put in approximately this spot with the accompanying electrical, plumbing, things that go with it, with the intent of, covering it as much as possible, making it as, non-noticeable as possible. But Hlpc in the past has not held applicants to exact measurements.
There's some that are a little longer.
Right.
I don't know of any that are any wider. They're all about the same width.
And we're not gonna see these from the street side.
You will see a little bit, just like you see the, right now there's window units in place. These will be actually a little bit lower.
So they are gonna face Main Street.
No, they face,
There
As
is
long as they don't
The-
face Main Street, that's all right.
what is the street, the catty corner, the
Price.
turn street right there? is
Price Street?
used-
And there's,
Price, yeah.
the only one that would be a little more visible from Mound Street is the one that's on the porch, which is, in my opinion, not visible at all. Even in the drawing, you can't really see it. But these are mainly on the sides of the house and not the very front facade. But unfortunately for this building, it's on a corner, so it's got 2 visible facades, and so really if you're gonna put any sort of utility, you're going to see it somewhere. And that's kind of one of the hazards of updating these older houses with modern amenities like air conditioning. So it happens.
But getting the windows unit out will be so nice.
That tends to be the preference that we've seen in historic preservation and in Hlpc in the past, is getting the window units out so the windows are functional and visible. And then usually the trade-off is either putting ductwork under the house, in an attic, or in this case, a mini split. And so we've seen it multiple different ways.
Any other questions or comments for staff?
Are we sure that they would You said the committee hasn't held them to any statements they've made about trying to cover it with landscaping or something. Is there anything that we could be assured that they would do to?
So the landscaping, not necessarily, because HLPC does not regulate planting of actual like bushes, anything like that. If it was something where the applicant said, we are going to put in some sort of screening around it, then yes, that's something that we could say, hey, you said you were gonna do a wood lattice screen and you put up concrete blocks instead. That's something we can hold applicants to, but if it's just, we intend to put as much landscaping as possible, we hope they do that, but we can't regulate planting of actual trees, bushes, things like that. It's more of the hardscape portion of landscaping that HLPC can look at. And in the past, requesting screening for HVAC units, things like that has not typically been requested, just because it's kind of one of the hazards of updating older houses is that you're gonna have to put an AC unit somewhere. And so typically you will have either the big standalones or mini splits like this or window units. So typically HLPC has not asked for that, and is not part of the application today.
Do I hear any other questions before I ask for a motion? All right, I'll ask, anybody like to make a motion one way or another about this? I guess you want me to do it? Oh, okay. Well, I will make a motion for COA 2024-008 to approve the application with regards to B, C, J, and K of the city ordinance.
I second that motion.
Okay. Discussion? All right. So, all in favor of the motion as stated, please state aye. Aye. Any opposed to the motion, please state aye. Okay.
Wonderful. And let me grab my other packet for our next item.
Excellent.
So our next item is purely discussion. This is a few committee members, including Ms. Judy, brought up the need to update our Nacogdoches Design Guidelines book. Most of you should have received this book during your new member orientation. If you've been on the committee a little bit longer and did not get one before I was here on staff, please let me know. I did bring copies today as well. This design guidelines, like we mentioned earlier, is not part of our city ordinances and so isn't necessarily enforceable, but is a document that we give out to new property owners, anybody that has questions about our historic districts. It goes into all sorts of different subjects. Each chapter is actually guidelines for new construction, alterations, color a little bit, site design, technical maintenance, signs, things of that nature, just kind of giving people suggestions on, if you have a commercial property, here's the type of lighting you should do, or here's the type of lighting we suggest or is most appropriate for our time periods and our periods of significance here in our historic districts. So the question was brought up, this wonderful document was made in July of 1991. They actually started working on it, I believe, in early 1990. It was a joint project between HLPC and then Winter and Company, which was a paid consultant. It was paid for by a certified local government grant. So the book is great. It's just dated. Doesn't take into account some of our properties that were individually designated that may not fall into these same design categories. Maybe some of the new additions. I believe somewhere in here it says you should not ever use any sort of hardy plank. It calls it like a plastic MDF board almost. Hardy plank now is pretty commonly accepted because it's come a long way since 1991. So some of the things in here are a little outdated. So I wanted to bring forth this discussion to the board today on, do we think that this needs to be updated? What do we think needs to be added? At what extent the update needs to be done? Because there are some things that staff can update on our end, excuse me, relatively easily. If it's a complete, this is all garbage and needs to be thrown out and we start from the ground up, that may be something that we form a subcommittee, look at getting a grant to hire a consultant that could take all of our ideas and actually write it. So really, this was just kind of to start the discussion on what needs to be added. Is it a full overhaul? Do you think it's great as is? Anything like that. So this was just kind of a discussion that we can go wherever we'd like to with it, as long as it's about design guidelines.
Yes.
Sure.
Go for it.
Well, I personally feel that this guideline is 33 years old, and I think it should be updated at least every 25 years, just like, I mean, our survey. As you know, we lost a building in town that I thought was, and I know Perky agrees with me, was a wonderful example of mid-century architecture, and then I came to find out it was done by my first employer, long before I was born. But not really, I was born, I was too young to know. So I think that we need to add another criteria. You have modern and Art Deco, but we don't include mid-century, that was a mid-century building. And if you look at the national and state guidelines, it fit. Unfortunately, the people on this committee didn't know that. So I just feel like we need to include those, for our knowledge, if nothing else. And then, I really do believe those need to be updated. And I just think that the Vincent survey is so out of date.
Yeah, and on another note, I have, this is updating surveys and design guidelines, so it all kind of fits in here. I have contacted Texas Historic Commission because updating those historic overlays is a very big job. It is not something staff just does on our own. So I am working with THC to come up with a date where they could potentially come and speak to the committee on how historic overlay updates are typically done, what can be done at the committee level, staff level, and then kind of what you need consultants for, and kind of gauging how y'all feel and which ones may be higher priority, and things like that. So we're looking at doing that in May or June, is what we're hoping for, on a separate note.
That sounds great.
Well, I'd add whatever mid-century modern or any other architectural styles, especially
Yes,
those in the last
anything
50 years. And if I remember, there's not much environmental. There's been a whole bunch of environmental and green options since this was written that, energy efficient and things that it doesn't. For example, something that we've had come up a few times here, I think Jeff might remember, film on windows. Yes, yeah. So, but that's not something included in the 1991.
I believe the one you're referencing, they were trying to put a tent like a window tent that almost made it almost reflective from the
almost
outside.
like a mirror.
And it was a big, can we actually regulate that because they're adhering it to the inside, but it affects the outside look.
Yeah.
So that was, I never want to do that again.
Yeah, but there's a lot of different things. Other materials that have come out, and there's just been
A lot. And we're not even getting into Lee buildings, so
Yeah.
still to come.
So
And a
that
few
would
other
be a
thing-
topic.
And a few other things that were suggested through me and Judy's conversation and a few other people was things like adding the website in here, because now we do have our city website that has a whole section on historic preservation, adding our forms, and then QR codes where you could link back to our district maps, printing the maps in here. So for some of it, so it's a guideline on historic architecture and preservation, but also here's how you do the process. Also, maybe not put word for word the ordinance in here, but tell people where to find historic preservation ordinances and things of that nature. So that way it really can be so you bought a new historic house. Here's how you deal with it.
Well, and I think color pictures, this really has never been anything but black and white,
Don't mean to laugh,
I mean-
but yes.
especially since it would presumably be mostly used as a digital version, which means there's no printing cost.
And I do think that in terms of the design guidelines, there ought to be something specific for us that doesn't go out to the homeowner. Like,
So what do you,
well, for instance, the criterias. How many people know the federal criteria for what constitutes a historic building? Do you know? Oh, we know, obviously. But see, I think we all need to know that.
and that may be something that staff can put together some packet, and maybe that's an additional resource we provide during new member orientation.
Yes.
I know we've given a lot of the same stuff for the past 10 years, if I had to guess. So it may be something, if there's additional documents that you feel like would help you as far as resources. If we get a list of those together, we can almost do a new member orientation for everybody, just to give out updated documents, resources, any of that sort of thing. So we can absolutely do that. That maybe is something separate from design guidelines. Maybe it's more of a how to be on Hlpc, or here's your resources, or here's some options you can look at. So we can look at that as well.
I'd also like to see accessibility. That's not something, 1990 was the act, so that wasn't on the radar. and that's become a larger issue with historic preservation.
Any other thoughts or anything? And some of this, we can also, since this is a discussion, we don't have to vote on anything. We do have copies of this. If anybody would like a new copy and you want to go through and dog ear and flag everything you think needs to be updated, questions you have, we can absolutely do that as well. But I'm happy to take any feedback today, and I may bring this back up at our next meeting to be like, okay, so here's what we got in the last month. Is this something that we want to update as a committee, or is it something we could create a subcommittee to help write a grant to try to get funding to help a consultant not write it for us, but write it with us. So that way we can throw everything at them and make them write it down, which I'm always a huge fan of. But is there any other feedback for today?
No, I mean, I know very little about it. I'm really grateful for you guys to be such experts, and if you think we should look at it again, I'm happy to do it in any way we can. I'll definitely look through it and see what I think.
Just as a clarification, so this would fall under a CLG grant?
Yes, it could. Yes, because
That fits under their criteria.
it does. And I went back and looked, just because we paid for it the first time with the CLG grant. I want to see if we could do it again. And we have missed the application for the 2024 cycle, but the 2025 cycle opens up, I think, December, maybe? I'll have to go back and double check.
They've been opening like in July and ending in November.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we could have the option to do that. And again, it doesn't need, in my opinion, this needs to be updated, not necessarily today, but it is something we can start working on with the intent of applying for a grant, or with the intent of updating it as a committee. I'm happy with whatever direction you all choose, but I just want to do this discussion today so that way we could get the ball rolling, and then I'll bring it back at our next meeting, and hopefully get some more feedback and kind of compile what we've talked about today and any other feedback that I get in between.
Would you be able to bring or provide links to, for example, as I was looking at City of Georgetown, which while has exploded, its historic downtown is similar to us, and they've obviously redone theirs, they're gorgeous. Would you be able to provide some samples?
Sure.
So we could see how ours is compared to some other comparable towns?
Absolutely.
Not obviously Houston, Dallas, that's not comparable.
Okay, I can absolutely look for some, because that's what we do on the staff end anyway, to see what we're shooting for, or see, we usually pull several examples and say, I like this part out of this one, this out of this one. So I can pull several examples from comparable cities and send those to y'all.
Yeah, even if we just had the URLs.
Absolutely.
Could we also maybe propose a yearly meeting outside of this meeting for us to have a design guidelines or the design book guidelines meeting to go over like a workshop or something with just the committee? And just have something like that.
Architectural tour.
We can, HLPC, in kind of our board handbook, we say we meet once a month to discuss these things,
Right.
but we are also allowed to call special workshops, special
Right.
meetings. Again, we can have discussions amongst the board, but they still are open meetings to the public, anytime we have a quorum. So, but we can absolutely
just might be
schedule additional
something.
meetings to discuss new member orientation, design guidelines, anything like
It
that.
might be something just to look into and have that as an option if we all agree to where once a year, everybody gets together and we go over all this, just to be sure all, up to date with anything that's changed or all the information. If we have the time and if we can do that,
I do think it'd be
that'd
helpful,
good.
because I know a lot of people get this book and we do new member orientation and maybe don't open it up again after that. So I do think a yearly refresher would be helpful.
Just an idea.
And as the new member, I know it would help me learn.
Okay.
It's always good, you always catch something new
Yeah.
each time.
That's all I had, and I
All
will,
you had?
yep, and I will kind of compile some of this, and if you have anything that you see in the design guidelines that you think sticks out like a sore thumb, you want me to specifically look at, you can send that to me at any time, either come by my office or via email.
Okay, so at this point, I will adjourn the meeting, and our next one should be April 1st.
I will
It's
not
no
pull any
joke.
tricks on you, I promise.
Yes.
Wow.
All right, we'll see you. Thank you.